Hey YouTube folks, welcome to another video on this channel, Esco in Sadrisco. And in today's video, yes, we're going to look at one of the most unbelievable games in chess history. Who played this game? Robert James Fischer, the famous Bobby Fischer, facing Donald Byrne here in 1956. And at that time, Bobby Fischer was only 13 years old. This game shows a lot of the great genius of this American. In fact, this game, right after it ended, in those days, newspapers called this the game of the century. So get ready, okay? Hold on to your seat, get your popcorn ready, and let's go to one of the greatest masterpieces in the history of chess. Now, so guys, here we are. And playing white was him, many times United States champion Donald Byrne against Robert James Fischer. And Byrne starts the game here with a knight to f3, bringing out the knight on the very first move. The game proceeds. Knight f6, c4, g6, knight c3, bishop g7, d4. And in this position, Bobby Fischer makes a very logical and natural move. He does two things with one move, castling to protect his king. Well, Bobby Fischer was a big fan of playing structures like the King's Indian, like the Grunfeld, and he's steering the game toward those positions. The bishop was just moved in this game. Bishop to f4 develops, and Fischer plays d5 to contest the center. Byrne responds with queen to b3, pressuring d5. Now in this position, Fischer, he captures the pawn on c4, queen takes c4, and now Donald Byrne threatens the c7 pawn. Bobby Fischer defended this pawn by playing c6, and now e4. White builds a super pawn center. Bobby Fischer continues developing, knight b to d7, rook d1, knight b6. Gaining a tempo, the queen moves to c5. One of Bobby Fischer's pieces still hasn't entered the game or been developed. The development is for the light-squared bishop to play, so he makes the move bishop to g4, already threatening to break the white pawn structure. And at this moment, Donald Byrne makes a move that goes down in chess history. What move was that? Bishop to g5. That's Donald Byrne's move. This move turns out to be a mistake, a subtle one that 99.9% of chess players would make. They wouldn't find the move that Bob Fischer found in this position, a brilliant move. I dare say that not even stock Fischer on his best days would find this divine masterpiece that Bob Fischer played in this position. A brilliant move. The main issue with this move is actually two things, okay? First, in the opening, you usually move each piece only once and try to speed up development as much as possible. Usually, it's not good to move the same piece twice. The bishop was already developed, and Byrne used it again. Normally, that's not ideal, but it may not be a major problem. In this position, Bob Fischer noticed a subtlety, and then that the bishop and the queen create a double attack position for the knight. That's the great subtlety of this move. Bishop to g5, which Bob Fischer didn't let slip by, and here he played the unbelievable knight to a4. And this is an unprecedented brilliance in the history of chess. But Raphael, Bob Fischer, gave up an entire knight. Seems like it, but be careful. Whenever a strong master gives you a piece, think twice. There's always a catch. So much so that Donald Byrne played the move queen to a3 here. But you might be thinking, but Raphael, why can't I play knight takes a4? What if I played knight takes a4? Bob Fischer wants to explore the double attack theme by playing knight takes e4. One of the most interesting moves for white is queen takes e7, but now Bob Fischer would need to play queen to a5. Check after check. Another tactic is to bring the rook to the file, exploiting the queen and king being on the same file. This is a serious problem. In this position, you can't play knight to c3, right? If you do, I take with knight on e. Rook to e8 is even stronger, capturing the queen. So one of the best responses here would be to play b4, opening an attack on the queen. Queen takes e4 would be the best continuation. This theme still remains here, always causing trouble, right? If you played a move here, I want to show this line because it's beautiful. For example, queen to c7, moving the queen off the king's file, could now be followed by knight takes g5. And if knight takes g5, you get checks with threats, with queen to d1. Certainly, Bob Fischer calculated this variation here, so this is a possible line, okay? All the lines that black plays there, they end up better. But then, after knight to a4, seeing this great brilliance, Byrne just moved the queen back to a3. He didn't take it, right? Bob Fischer continued with knight takes c3. The theme appears again, right? Taking with the queen leads to knight takes e4, resulting in the same double attack, leaving black in a much better position. Donald Byrne took the pawn here. With the e4 pawn falling, Bob Fischer captured it. The game continues with bishop takes e7. You might wonder, did Bob Fischer blunder here? He fell for it. He fell for a fork. He didn't see the fork. Be very careful. Bob Fischer had already calculated this and calmly played queen to b6 Byrne. He played bishop to c4, continuing piece development. But you must be thinking, hold on, Raphael, why didn't Donald Byrne just capture this bishop here on this rook square after queen moves to b6 on f8? Well, the line that Fischer had calculated here was the following. If he took, he would play bishop takes f8, opening a counterattack on the queen on b3. That would be the best continuation. And now, rook to e8. It's a very subtle move, taking advantage of this theme of the super king in the center. Byrne could trade queens now, a for b6. And now, it's not easy to solve the problem of this king here, because the king is exposed, he couldn't castle. The best move is bishop to e2, blocking the file temporarily. Then I could play knight takes c3, attacking the rook and bishop, and threaten rook takes e2. Terrible. And in this position, if you played rook to d2, then bishop to b4. Another tactical theme arises due to the king being in the center. The best move is king to f1, after which Bobby Fischer would respond precisely. That's knight to b1 attacking the rook. And if the rook moves to d1, then knight to d2 is another brilliant move. And now white is going to be completely lost, okay? For example, if they play king to g1 to get out of check, I already have rook takes e2, so the best possible continuation would be to take with the rook here, okay? And then the move bishop takes d2. If they play knight takes d2, I can respond with rook takes e2 attacking the knight. My rook is on the 7th, the h1 rook is stuck, and white's position is collapsing. Knight to b3 could follow. And now you might be thinking, hey, Raphael, now the pawn on a2 is falling, we're winning. Exactly. But the best move here would be rook to b2, because the main point is that the king can't defend the rook here. On h1, the best move is f3, then rook to b1 king to f2. Both the rook and bishop are lost. We'll play this endgame with black having an extra exchange, and Bobby Fischer would easily win. Donald Byrne saw all of this, okay? After queen to b6, he avoided taking the rook on f8 and played bishop to c4 instead. Why? Because he wants to castle quickly. And at this moment, again, Bob Fischer finds a move here that is very, very beautiful, truly brilliant. He plays the move knight takes c3, opening an attack now on the rook at d1. And in this position, the move bishop to c5 was played. Is he attacking the queen here? Why did he play that? Why didn't he just capture the knight here, right? If he captured the knight again, he would fall into a much worse line, which would be the rook to e8 line, exploring again the theme of the king in the center. If he defends the bishop with queen to e3, I can play bishop. Takes f3, pawn takes f3, then bishop to f6. I'm threatening to take here and win the queen. The best move is rook to e7. In this position, black is much better. Why? Because my pieces are more active, the white king is very exposed, the castling is broken. Fischer's advantage would be significant, so Byrne avoided this variation again. After knight takes c3, he played bishop to c5 as an intermediate move, attacking the queen and making another move that immortalizes this game. Bobby Fischer here, he didn't defend the queen, okay? He played the intermediate move first, the check. Rook to f8, king in check. Moves to f1 now, you all must be waiting. Now Bobby Fischer will defend his queen. Makes perfect sense, right? Bobby Fischer plays another divine move here, which is the brilliant bishop. On e6, sacrificing the queen on move 17 is a historic chess move, because Bobby Fischer's vision was unattainable. There's a threatened queen, a knight hanging, and Bobby Fischer's idea is to take the bishop on c4 here. Donald Byrne said, no, this is too much, giving up the queen all the time. He played bishop takes b6, and now Bobby Fischer continues his brilliance by playing bishop takes c4. The king moves to g1, and now the knight to e2, and Bobby Fischer puts the white king here in an absolutely locked position. He's about to capture many pieces because there's a beautiful theme here. Look at that. King f1 was played, knight takes d4. Now the king can't move to e1, only back to g1. I take a pawn, the king returns to g1, knight moves to e2 again, and the cycle repeats. The king is trapped with only 2 available squares. Bob Fischer plays the move here now. Donald Byrne makes the move. King to f1, knight to c3, then king to g1, and now comes the capture here on b6, opening an attack on the queen. The queen can't take the knight, The knight is defended by the bishop on g7. It jumped to b4, and Byrne's idea now is to attack the bishop here, right? So that when these checks come and the king goes to f1 when the knight leaves, I take the bishop on c4. So Bobby Fischer already had an antidote for this. He played the move rook to a4 here, keeping the defense of the bishop. The queen is threatened and taken on b6. The game continues with the d1 knight taking the knight, followed by h3. Byrne is trying to create escape squares for the king and allow the rook to take on a2. It's Bob Fischer's move, and this position here is very beautiful because Bob Fischer has a material advantage here. All his pieces are super active, all his pieces are in play, and Donald Byrne here has a queen that's just there playing, right? But the rook on h1 is like a piece down because it's not participating in the game. Here, king h2 is played quickly to activate the rook, right? Bob Fischer plays knight takes f2, attacking Byrne's rook on a1 and offering exchanges. Bob Fischer says, it's fine, let's trade pieces. I'm comfortable here. He played rook takes e1 queen to d8 as an intermediate check, bishop to f8, then knight takes e1 to recapture, right? Bishop to d5, Bob Fischer's idea is now applying pressure. Here, the rook is on g2 the 7th, and the knight is jumping in next. Knight to f3 was played, blocking pressure on g2, and now Bob Fischer moves knight to e4, now increasing the pressure on the g2 square at the moment. No threat has been created. On the board, the move queen to b8 was played, maintaining the pin here from the bishop, right? Because otherwise, moves like bishop to d6 would come. But for now, it's pinned. So the move b5 was played. Bob Fischer advances his pawns, echoing Nimsewich. The passed pawn has a soul, a life. h4 was played. Bob Fischer calmly responded with h5, and Byrne played knight to e5. Now king moves to g7, creating a strong threat with bishop to d6, attacking the queen and knight. Here, the move king to g1 was played. And in this position, Bob Fischer already has the move bishop to d6. But he was even more refined and played the move bishop to c5 when the king jumps to the f1 square. The main point is, if you play king to h2, then bishop goes to d6. Now I take the knight with check, right? Donald Byrne avoided that variation. After bishop to c5, he plays king to f1, and now Fischer found a finishing line here. Brilliant to finish the game of the century in style. He plays knight to g3. The king had only one escape. e1, he moved to e1, then bishop to b4, and the king moved again. There's only one escape. d1 king moves to d1 bishop to b3, and the king is trapped again. Only c1 is open. He played king to c1, then knight to e2, then the king again. Now only b1 is left. He played king to b1, then knight to c3, leaving only c1 for the king. King to c1 was played, and the game ends with checkmate with tomatoes, with rook to c2. Bob Fischer's a genius in the history of chess. This game here, it has to be framed and put on a picture in our living room, because this is a work of art. There you go, guys. At least a little bit of the great genius of Bob Fischer and what's known as the game of the century. If you enjoyed this game, don't forget to hit that like button down below, and I'll see you in the next videos.